Good morning, Phoenix, and welcome to the House of Mystery radio show. This is the place to come for true crime, conspiracy, and alternative history. Only on KFNX 1100 Independent Talk Radio. We're here every Saturday morning, 6 to 7 a.m., and I'm your host, Al Warren. Back in the House of Mystery, and today we are going back into the subject of innocent convicted people, and you know, we've had quite a few people on talking about it, and it's something that seems to be more common now. So joining us is another author who's done Convicting the Innocent, Stanley Cohen. Thanks for being on the show.
Not at all. My pleasure.
So first of all, let's talk about you. How did you get into writing this book, and what drew you to it?
Well, I've always been interested in this. I mean, it started way back, basically. When I say way back, when I was in college, I think it was in my sophomore year. So we're talking about 60 years ago, thereabouts. And it just turned out that back to back, I had two classes, one in sociology, where the sociology professor brought up the Lord Leopold trial that Clarence Darrow got him off of death sentence, and said at the end, this is the best defense of a human life ever made. And second, right after that, I had a philosophy course in which the professor assigned Plato's Apology, where Socrates was said to make the best plea for human life of all time. So I read them back to back. I prefer actually the Darrow one, but at that point I got very interested in the death penalty and all its inequities and, so far as I'm concerned, immoralities. And basically I've been interested in that subject and the skewed system we have of justice, you know, for all these years. As a matter of fact, in the 60s, when New York abolished capital punishment, I had written a series of articles. I'd been on the radio, and I got a commendation from the assemblyman who introduced the bill for having taken part in that. So this is something I've been interested in all along. And 13 years ago, I wrote a book called The Wrong Men, which dealt exclusively with wrongful death row conviction. This book updates that and also extends to other issues that resulted in what we call a broken system of justice. Well, so that's how I've been into it. This has been basically my subject for all these years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been finding it a lot. What do you think is well, I guess there's no real one cause, but what generally happens? Like, why is it that people are getting convicted wrongly and some of them being sent to death? What about the system is just not working?
Well, the system depends. It's become a competitive system where the prosecution it basically is staked on getting a conviction. That's how district attorneys get ahead. That's how policemen get ahead. And the politicians are very much involved. We've gotten to a point in recent years where there's been a big push for what they call law and order, and people think that the death penalty, for one, deters capital crimes, which it does not. But basically, the system is inherently corrupt because, as I said, it begins with the prosecution. District attorneys are paid to convict, and so are police. Really, it begins before the prosecution. It begins very often with police corruption, and people getting ahead by making what they call major collars, major arrests. As a matter of fact, right in the book, we have a case in Brooklyn of Detective Scarcella, who they found quite by accident that every collar he made in the capital case resulted in a conviction. And then they found that the same witness was the witness to about half a dozen. So she turned out it was accidentally around whenever somebody was being killed. And, it turned out, of course, that she was a paid witness. And in the end, about 71 cases of Scarcella's are being reviewed. There've already been 12 overturned. So, I mean, we've been looking, in effect, to convict rather than to acquit. The notion that one is innocent until proven guilty has been stood on its head, pretty much.
You think it's getting worse now than, let's say, in the 50s and 60s? No. It's always been bad. It was worse then. Oh.
If you look at the convictions, and I'm only talking about right now about capital cases. Not about a guy who breaks in or a petty theft or something. It was really worse then because nobody was paying much attention to it at the time, and there's been a great change in the disposition of the public towards capital punishment. If you just go back to 1999, I'm approximating here. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but around that time, 80% of the public favored capital punishment. The last nationwide survey, which was, I think, in 2013, it was only 56%. So it's gone down. Executions have gone down. Capital convictions have gone down. But what happened is that it came to light, back in the 90s, and again, I don't remember the exact date. It was probably around 1996, 95, 96, really almost at the time of the O.J. Simpson case, when they found that DNA was used to find that a lot of these people were actually innocent. And so the DNA became what fingerprints had become early in the 20th century. When fingerprinting began, they found out now we have a means of testing whether people really were there or did it or not. But the fingerprint is not nearly as exact as DNA, and the DNA tends to be true, to like 1 in a million. So that brought attention to it. Justice, the innocence. Trying to think of the exact title of a Barry Scheck's group, Peter Neufeld. The Innocence Project is what it's called.
Right.
They worked on this, and they found that the DNA, began to really find that people were innocent who were there, and so this brought attention on it. It focused the attention on the fact that a lot of innocent people were spending a long time in death row, and some of them being executed. So, there's something else I'd want to say about this. The late Justice Scalia, was very much an exponent of capital punishment, to almost a sick degree, As a matter of fact, basically, what he said, it's never been proven that an innocent man has been executed. But actually it has, but only a few times. But what he didn't say, and the reason for that, he obscured the truth, is that once a man has been executed, all study stops. The state doesn't look any further. There's no reason to. And usually the family of the man is very poor. That's one of the things that the wrongful convictions have in common. They're almost always dirt poor. So they're not going to pay to have an investigation to prove that the falsely executed person was really innocent. But, it's clear the estimates are that anywhere, depending on a review, from 4.5% to 10% of those wrongfully convicted have been executed.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that's where it stands. But people began to look at it when there was some evidence that the system was going wrong.
Well, and it seems to me that prosecutors, people in the power now, when something gets proven or DNA comes back, they still don't want to admit it.
That's right.
They still hold on to the conviction, or they try to, or they might retry it, or they just don't get up and say, "Oh yeah, okay, this is wrong. Obviously, we did the wrong thing."
That's right.
What's the deal with that? That I really don't understand. It makes them look bad.
Well, it makes them look bad because they are. I mean, the basic problem with it, and I don't know how you could subvert it, is that the people who prosecute, beginning with the arrest of the police, the prosecution of the prosecutor, and right on through the judiciary system, are paid to get convictions. And so it's not supposed to be the equal of a basketball game, and you see how many you win, how many you lose. It's supposed to be a quest for justice. But it really isn't, because one side is paid to get a conviction, the other side is paid the other way to get an acquittal. And so you fundamentally have a contest rather than a search for justice in which one side cooperates with the other. One of the things that is so prevalent is how many times the prosecution has not turned over exculpatory evidence to the defense. So many cases it found that they had evidence, the prosecution had evidence that the person was innocent, and illegally withheld it, which they're not supposed to do. But another problem is that almost universally, the people who have been wrongfully convicted, I think roughly in this book I have somewhere around 70 cases. And I'm estimating now, but I'd say in more than 60 of them, what transpired was to the effect that the defendant did not have adequate counsel. Most of these people are absolutely impoverished. Many of them are, below what they're supposed to be for intelligence. The IQ level of whatever it is, 60 or 70, and they don't have the means to hire a Clarence Darrow. I mean, OJ got off. There's no doubt, I think, in anyone's mind that OJ was guilty. He got off because he had a defense worth millions and millions of dollars. The average person who's wrongfully accused and convicted does not have access to that kind of defense. And so he comes up against a professional prosecution that does nothing but prosecute these cases. And some of them get a lawyer. There are cases in the book. This was the attorney's first criminal trial. He was a guy who made out wills and stuff, and now the state has to provide an attorney, so they provide him for the defense. He doesn't know anything about it. There are cases in the book where the defense attorney never called a witness. And also, even the good ones are loaded down. You give a guy 15 cases, he can't do justice to all of them. And so basically the defense is inadequate and the prosecution is highly professional. And that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, it's working its way out of common people. They can't afford the justice system.
That's right. That's right. There's an insufficient number of public defenders, and very many of them. Some of them, are the best that you can get in that they're really committed to it because they're attorneys who could be making a lot more money doing something else. And so very many of them are really committed to this. But, there are others that are just drawn that are assigned by the state that have no experience and no adequate training in this at all.
Yeah, it's crazy. In that Making of a Murderer whole documentary on Netflix, sure, I think the biggest shock for people was what went on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much.
Yeah, I saw that. It's true, yeah.
Yeah, it's not so much about the crime itself. It's just about how the first one he wasn't guilty and DNA proved it, but they knew it and they didn't care and they left him in prison. And they still fight it. And I think it really upset people. They kind of thought, well, the justice system's there for me.
Right. That's right. Well, although one of the things with all these shows and so forth that have been going on, I find that the people that I've been arguing with over these past 50 years, some of them have begun to move now. I've had a few of them say, I'm beginning to think that maybe you've been right. And, the system is being exposed. It was, first of all, the opening of information between just now and 1950, say, the past 50, 60 years, is enormous. You've got everything going on now between the internet and television, where people before a guy was arrested, he was, sentenced and killed, and not many people knew about it. There'd be a 2-paragraph item in the paper saying that, so-and-so was executed last night for such and such, and nobody paid it any mind. Now, you have the exposure through the media, and it's begun to make a difference. As I said, it's gone down from roughly 80% approval to 56%.
So what do you think's going to happen? Do you think the system will change somewhat?
Yeah. I think gradually it will erode in that direction. As bad as it is now, and I don't know, there've been, if I recall, about 143 cases of wrongful death row conviction since roughly 2000 or thereabouts. But I think, since this is being called to people's attention, that it will begin to erode, it will begin to go down. And the problem is that people are afraid. They're politicians. It'd be wrong to underestimate the role that politics plays in this, because the politicians want to run on, a platform of tough on crime. No one wants to be called weak on crime. It's a death knell if you're running for office. They want to be tough on crime. We safeguard people and whatnot. We have so many convictions, and they run on that. And generally, the public, is not a student of this, and so that sounds pretty good. Sure, I want you to be tough on crime. I want you to get murders off the streets, and so forth. And that's what keeps it going. But so far as the death penalty, especially, that's been wearing away. When people's conscience gets, jabbed, finding that possibly innocent people are being killed. The other thing, of course, that goes on that, is an issue is solitary confinement. There are people held in solitary for 10, 20, 30 years, some, which I don't know how they last. What solitary involves, and usually a death row conviction involves going into a death row solitary confinement. And this varies from state to state. So some, like mostly in the South, so Louisiana, Alabama, are horrendous. What it is an individual cell, usually somewhere about 9 by 10 feet. If you can just picture how small that is. And that's all that the prisoner has. There's no window. There's no source of entertainment. And he's there by himself for 23 hours a day. 1 hour a day he's let out into the public forum. His meals are served by putting him through an opening in a door. And he stays that way for 23 hours a day for years. I don't know how, because many don't survive. They come out. A horrendous case just recently in New York where the kid killed himself after he was released. If you've ever been in the hospital or something for a long time, realize how forlorn and hopeless that can be. Just imagine what it is to be in that kind of confinement endlessly, knowing you may never get out. That's another aspect of this is that fair and speedy disposition. It usually takes an average of about 12 years until a capital case is ultimately decided. Now, if you speed it up, you're going to have more innocent people killed. So, the death penalty is utterly useless unless you want revenge.
Right,
and
right. Yeah.
That's
it seems like other countries, too, have gone, Canada, places like that haven't had death penalty in years.
Oh, absolutely. We're the only country in the West that still has it. No country in North or South America has it any longer. We talk about Cuba and how outrageous, their government is. Cuba eliminated the death penalty in 2013. Russia doesn't have the death penalty. No country in Europe has the death penalty. And they started abolishing it basically in the 60s. And, year by year, more and more did away with it. The United States is basically the only country in the industrialized world that still has the death penalty. And people seem to be proud of it. They run on it as an enhancement. You got both candidates now. Of course, Trump loves it. And Hillary apparently or reluctantly supports it. I don't think even she knows why. But I mean, I know she does know why. Because it'd be too dangerous to say I oppose it.
Right.
You don't lose votes when you're for capital punishment, but you do lose them when you're against it. And so every politician, very few are willing to stake their reputation and the possibility of a political defeat by opposing it. Mario Cuomo, when he was governor of New York, to his great credit, opposed it openly. And impossible, he lost an election finally because of it.
Why do you think that the public holds on to that? Like, why is it a selling point? Just it's like a punishment?
Yeah, it's the punishment aspect. I mean, you killed, you ought to be killed. There's still, I hate to say, but a Wild West mentality in this country. That goes back to the old days of Billy the Kid and so forth. You killed my pappy, now I'm going to send you up to Boot Hill. A vigilante type operation. It's the same impulse that we have with guns. Why is this country so gun crazy? I think it goes back basically to that. But in all sorts of guns, there's no reason for anyone to have, attack weapons. The AR-15, if I have the number right. There's no reason for anyone to own a weapon like that. It's for mass killing. It's a semi-automatic weapon. When I was in the Army, I was trained on one of those. That was many years ago. But of course, that was, with the notion that one day you may have to use it in a war. But why a civilian would need a semi-automatic machine gun? I mean, you take target practice with that? I don't know. I never heard of such a thing. But, the gun lobby in this country is the most powerful lobby in the whole country. And although they impose, over 70% want to limit the access to guns, the NRA is just powerful enough that, it won't relent. And the politician is worried about that. So politics plays a large part in this. The same instinct to have guns is the instinct of retribution. And there are so many instances. Of course, there are instances as well where people were let out and killed again. But those are few compared with some of those where a person has been remade by a justice system, which makes a lot more sense. It's very costly to imprison someone for 12 years and then kill them.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, they found in studies, and the study was conducted in North Carolina, hardly a liberal state, that it cost almost twice as much to execute somebody as to just sentence them to a prison term, because they have to pay for all the appeals. Expert witnesses come from all over the country. They're all paid for by the state. And, it's more costly to have it, but there's something about it that somehow satisfies people. They talk about, it's biblical, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, it says in the Old Testament. But it also says in the same book, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So maybe you want an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but it's not you who's supposed to decide if you believe the Bible.
Right.
So this is just, this is what keeps both of these things going. The access to guns and capital punishment. We are in a way, a violent society.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. By far. The thing is, I don't think people realize it within the country itself.
Well, to a certain degree, there are people who feel that we're safer. I told my friend, I said, we can't do away with it, or the streets are going to be like the Wild West. Well, no, they won't. All studies have shown that comparative states that have it and don't have it, North Carolina and South Carolina, for example, the one without it has fewer capital crimes. That's true throughout. There are countries, or not countries, but states who had it and did away with it, and when they did away with it, capital crimes decreased. There's a sanctity of life that capital punishment violates. But there's also, an instinct of retribution that runs against it. And,
right. Yeah.
Lots of people think it deters crime, but it doesn't.
No. I don't see how it would, because, it makes no sense. It's not going to stop, because it would have to be in your mind, I can't do this because I'm going to get killed.
Like most homicides take place between known people who know each other. A husband and a wife, or lovers, or somebody who's been cheated in some kind of a deal or whatnot. We're getting these crazy mass murders now. This is something fairly new, in the past number of years, whether it's ISIS or not. We didn't have much of that back in the old days. So usually most homicides were committed by somebody who knew the other person and killed them anyway. The OJ, I just been watching the series on OJ, the 5-part series that they had. And, OJ, killed his wife and her presumed lover, Golden. And, it was not something, OJ, if you let him loose again, which I don't advocate, of course, it's not likely he's going to go out and kill other people.
Right.
He was enraged by, within this situation, whatever it was, and, he turned violent and killed them, which, of course, is a terrible thing. But it's not a question where he's basically a murderer who's going to go out and kill other people, like these mass murdered shooters. So most of those crimes, that's why capital punishment doesn't deter that, because the person is doing it in a rage. Obviously, Simpson was in a rage he couldn't control when he committed that crime.
Right, it was personal.
Yes.
These mass murders and the killings and the guns themselves have created an atmosphere in the country where people are scared and they feel they need a gun to protect themselves.
Right.
So it's kind of this vicious circle. I don't see how we're going to get out of that. I really don't.
I don't suppose we'll ever completely get out of that, no.
Because you can look at other countries, civilized people that are close to us in culture, like, I bring up Canada again, and
right.
Even the UK and Australia and France and all these that have a fairly similar lifestyle. And
mm-hmm.
when they've taken away death penalty and they've taken away, the high weapons like the AR-15 and stuff, their crime rates and murder rates are so much lower.
Right.
And we have to look at that logically, not emotionally, but logically, and go, well, why does it work for all of these people that live?
Well, one of the other things in this country is there's a kind of bigotry, a racism, that really you don't have that much of in a place like Canada.
Right.
Here a lot of this is the white population saying that you've got to have it because the blacks are murderous people and they'll come and kill you. And people are afraid and believe that. So there's a kind of both racial, especially now with the Islam, that, here you've got a presidential candidate, which is hard to believe, who wants to ban an entire religion from going to the United States, because dealing with 1.5 billion people.
Yeah.
And, you've had this racial bigotry all along, and, of course, that funnels into the criminal justice system as well. The majority of people who have been wrongfully convicted and executed or rotted on death row are black. So, they don't have that kind of problem very much in a place like Canada, as we have here. Bigotry is part of the fundament of this country.
Do you think it's also having the access of a gun? Because I was told once by a prominent Canadian that the difference is when you kill someone with a knife, it's much more personal.
Yes.
And it's not as easy to do.
Right.
You can be upset for the moment, pull out the gun and shoot.
Right.
But that's not something you'll do with a knife. It's just not as easy.
That's right.
So I wonder if that has something to do with it, right? Because
that does absolutely have something to do with it. Not only is it more personal, but it's not as quick. The gun, you shoot somebody, bang, the job's done.
Right.
You pull the trigger once. Very often, with a knife, it requires multiple stab wounds.
Yeah.
and you got to stab a person a number of times, and whoever it is fighting back. So if you took away guns, it'd make a huge difference. And it's just incredible. Just the other day when the Senate refused to pass that legislation, it seems incredible to me that such minor adjustments like background checks and that anyone would be opposed to that. I mean, how can you be opposed to a fact that if somebody is on a terrorist suspicion list and barred from flying, that they still should be able to buy a gun?
Yeah.
It's okay to fly, but you can't. But it's okay to have a gun, but you can't fly. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. If you look at it logically, but I think a lot of people are tied up in emotion, and
well, absolutely,
and they're not thinking.
Yeah. And it's also ignorance. It's emotion and it's ignorance.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just don't want to think about it. I was on a show a couple of weeks ago, but it was a call-in show, and some maniac called in and cursed me out. Not in actual obscene terms, but telling me I was a danger and a dope and this and that and whatnot. And I'm like, people like me, what's wrong with the country? And the guy's guilty. You shouldn't even bother. You shouldn't hold him for a long period of time. He's guilty. Kill him right then and there. Once he's convicted, don't let him appeal. Shoot him right then. Firing squads, whatever. And so you have a lot of nutty people that way.
Yeah.
And guns are not a good thing for a nutty person to have.
No, I know. We put more regulation on a car and driving and insurance.
That's right.
Than we do on guns. It makes no sense. I think that you can keep the idea that you're an American citizen, you have the right, but just like you have a lot of other rights to own property, do things, but there's got to be responsibility.
Yeah. Well, also the thing that really gets me is that when you drive a car, when you have to display that you have the ability to drive a car properly. With a gun, you don't have to display anything. You don't have to show whether you even know how to use it. So a lot of shootings go off because the gun is shot accidentally. The gun is left in the house, and a 6-year-old gets it and shoots whoever's around. You don't have to prove any kind of expertise with the gun at all. And, if you put a gun in my hand, I wouldn't know what to do with the damn thing to begin with. If it was an M1 rifle, I would. It's stuff that I used when I was in service. But if you put a Glock in my hand, I wouldn't know what to do with it. And I wouldn't have to display any expertise at all. I would be able to go in and buy such a gun because obviously, my record is clear. There's no reason not to. I have an honorable discharge from the Army and whatever else you need. And so they give me a gun. I wouldn't know what to do with it. And honestly, why you should not have to prove a certain degree of knowledge and expertise before you can have one. It's a deadly weapon.
Well, yeah, it's just common sense things. But just being on the radio and being around and getting a lot of people seem to be scared that if they don't have a gun, someone's going to come take away their home, someone's going to rob them, or the government's going to come take their guns. There's all this stuff out there, and I just don't get it because, it's the same thing over and over. Obama's going to stay another term. He's going to come take all your guns. Right. He'll go out, someone else will get in, and then it'll be their turn. It'll be, if it's Clinton, it'll be her. Oh, she's just going to take away your guns. It's the same thing, and it's frustrating because I don't see an out. It just keeps going on and on and on. And I said earlier that I think it's going to decrease, but I can't see how it's going to get done away with. Well, the death penalty itself. Yeah. With Scalia off the court, if a Democrat, basically Hillary, is elected, I think that with another judge on the court and a proper case coming up, I think they might overturn it completely. Although I'm not sure Hillary will appoint a judge that would be against it because she says she still supports it. But I think you could have I think Kennedy, I think there are a number of people who are ready to vote. I think 4 justices ready to vote against it. Right. You need one more. Well, that's a difficult thing, because we don't know who's going to get in, and then look how they haven't let the guy that's been up for it now even be versed.
Right.
So we have to wait and see where it goes. I think that politically Hillary, or even Trump for that matter, will jump on what they will think will get them elected. So.
Oh, there's no question about that.
They're both going to say, yeah. So right now it's in style to say,
absolutely.
So
that's another one of the things that happens in our political system. I think they would do nearly anything to get elected. Not just them, but most people whose ambition drives them to be president have that same kind of obsession. You've gone this far. I got to win. This is the World Series. I won the pennant. I want to win this one. So I think that's prevalent.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Plato's philosophy, back 2,500 years ago, in the Dialogue of the Republic, Plato said that no one should have public office who wants it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what happened. I thought that being president and being in public office was to be the service to the country.
Right.
It's your service to the country. You're doing something just like being a police officer, just like being a fireman. Like that's being in the military and going to war. You're servicing the country. You're doing it for the people.
Right.
So, but now it seems to be different. It's more about power.
Yeah.
And
that's true. And I think one of the things that happens, and I think it's a natural human instinct, is somebody goes in with that view at heart and gets on the state assembly, and then runs for Congress and gets elected to Congress, maybe to the Senate, whatnot. And people say, "You do a good job. Why don't you run for president or governor, whatever?" And at that point, it becomes, it goes to your head. I think what's going on with Bernie Sanders now, I think he got into this race just to move the party to the left, the agenda that he wants. And this is just my guess. I have no knowledge of this. I think basically he was we'll do some good that way. I know I can't win. Then when he sees he gets close and he has this huge following, he doesn't want to give it up. That's my thought. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting here wearing a Bernie a shirt that they sent me. So clearly, it's something that I believed in. But I think it's gotten to the point now where you smell the ultimate office of power, and you have this mass audience that you never suspected, of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of young people cheering you like a rock star, and you're 74 years old. I mean, it must be hard to give that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think basically that's what happens. It becomes an obsession. I've gone this far. I could be president of the United States.
Yeah.
At that point, you're willing to give up a lot and do a lot of things you ordinarily wouldn't have thought of doing in order to make it real.
But I think that's also what happens, because even the justice system, when you talk about that and the convictions and the prosecution, but look at OJ being televised. Isn't it doing the same thing? I mean, you televise the trial, and Marcia Clark, all of a sudden there's pictures of her naked on a beach, and you got Saturday Night Live making fun of the judge, and all of a sudden the whole thing. You can't tell me that doesn't change their behavior and their performance.
It does. It does.
How? Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely, it obviously does. Sure.
I mean, down in Arizona here, I interviewed for the Jodi Arias case, the prosecutor, as well as Nurmi, the defense, and wow, the effect on their lives that trial had is just amazing. And how can you, I don't know how good it is to do that.
Well, you're right. I don't know how you don't do that. However,
well, I think it should be public, but I just wonder if I don't know. There's just because we're affecting the outcome of the trial. If we really want justice, we think that person's guilty or not. We shouldn't want it to be jaded any more than it is.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, we're sort of tainting the whole everything. I just don't know. I understand it should be our right to see and know what's going on, but I wonder if it should be more after the fact.
Well, not only it also depends on what aspects people are looking for, and very rarely is the media looking to educate the public and how the justice system works by showing the mechanics of it. They want to show the parts that are racy.
Right.
Especially now, you have all the competition on these television news shows. The cable shows where they run all day and all night, and each one's looking for a beat. That's what we call but they call it scoop, to get something that the other station doesn't have, and they often go with it too soon. They're looking for these elements. I used to work, like most people won't remember, International News Service, INS. It used to be AP, UP, and INS back in the old days, and I worked for INS for a while. And the motto there was get it first, but first get it right and write it right. And I don't think that exists on television where the thing happens. They want to beat the internet to it, and I don't think they wait to make sure that they're getting it right. And just go with it. And what attracts attention is what they're going to use.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. The major news services now in the U.S. are about the looks of the person.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Fox News. Everybody looks like they are Pilates instructors. They're all
right. That's right.
It's all about the look and about that, because they are competing with the internet, and that's true. And it's 24 hours to fill, and so they just talk about the same thing over and over and over, and there's not a whole lot of, I find I have to get my news off of other sources, because within the U.S. it's not necessarily news.
Well, that's right. It's another thing that I laugh at very often is, when you're watching one of these news programs on television where they put up a thing, breaking news. What is the breaking news? The breaking news is that so-and-so arrived for his speech.
Yeah.
When I was in the newspaper, this was not breaking news. You knew the guy was scheduled to speak at 8 o'clock. It's not breaking news that he's there.
Yeah. Yeah. You watch any of the European news or anything, it's just totally opposite. There's so much going on right now, even with ISIS and things, and about them losing Fallujah and all the different things. They don't even mention it on our news feeds.
Right.
It's just crazy. I don't know what to say about that. So I think it goes hand in hand with the justice system, but like how you were talking.
Right.
And the whole,
I think it's all interconnected.
Yeah, it's all sort of the way we're doing things as a country, and I think that I just don't know how we're going to get out of it. I don't know, how are we going to make the justice system better? How are we going to help these people from not being convicted? And also, like you say about the race, and minorities tend to get it worse, and a lot of it's because they can't afford it.
Well, that's right. Not only that, you have people in prison and on death row because they can't come up with $3,000 bail. Hello?
Yeah. It's just crazy.
I just heard a hum. I didn't know what happened.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they can't. The story I had, I think I closed the book pretty much with it, is a young kid, teenager, I think he was 18 or thereabouts. He was arrested for stealing a backpack. Now, he was convicted of stealing. Even though he wasn't convicted of stealing a backpack, he was put in jail waiting for trial. Now, it says speedy trial, and that's considered 6 months. He was in there for 3 years. And he was kept in solitary. For what reason, nobody can figure. Stealing a backpack doesn't make you very dangerous.
Yeah.
Finally, they let him loose because you can't keep him that long. It's not much of a crime. And he couldn't adjust outside. And one day, his mother found him hanging outside the apartment building. He tied himself up, anchored it to the apartment, and hanged himself. The kid at the time, I think, was 23. It just ruined him. And how do you keep somebody in jail for 3 years waiting trial on a charge of stealing the backpack. But, the 6 months is measured in such a way that if there are holidays, it doesn't count. If the judge is on another case or whatever, so that in 3 years, it took 3 years for him to total up to 6 months. And, I'll tell you, one of the things I think that is going to be the first to go is solitary confinement. The sign that maybe things are loosening up a little bit is that Obama recently was the first president to ever enter a federal institution, prison. And he saw that he looked in the solitary cell and he was horrified. And so that for a while became an issue. Of course, it's disappeared now. But, for a while that became an issue, that we should not have solitary confinement. And even some people in the judiciary agree with that it's inhumane. And, the system we have makes hardened criminals out of basically inadvertent criminals to a certain degree. So that's another aspect of the system.
So how's the response been on the book?
So far, sales, you mean?
Yeah, do you get a lot of negative feedback on this sort of subject? Or
I have not. One of the things is that you don't get any real indication on a book for 3 months, and it's not 3 months yet, because booksellers who get the book can return them after 3 months, and until then you don't know really how it's moving, unless it's that they're running out of books very fast. But the responses I've had so far as commentary, just about all have been favorable. Some of them very enthusiastically so. I've gotten, I got letters from some prisoners. One of them was somewhere in, I think it's Florida. I know it's a southern state. No, I think it's North Carolina. And he wrote to me saying that they will not let him contact an attorney that one of his prison mates used to get him out, and they won't help him find the attorney that he would want to contact. Can I help him? And so I researched, and I found the attorney, got his office number and everything else, and sent it to him. Whether he ever got it or not, I don't know. I don't know whether they read the mail and knock that stuff out. But I've had basically very good response. But fundamentally, this type of book is going to attract the people who are on your side to begin with.
Right.
People who favor the capital punishment, kill them, get it over with, are not likely to go out and buy a book of this type that advocates a position that's not their own. And so generally the reaction will be favorable. I've also had favorable reaction from DPIC, the Death Penalty Institute in Washington, and places like that. So basically, I would say the reaction has been overwhelmingly favorable. But you'd expect that. People who don't. Well, most of the people who believe the other way probably have trouble reading without moving their lips to begin with.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there you go.
Now I'll tell you how I really feel.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just get it all out now.
Right.
Well, right. Yeah. It's an interesting subject, and I've had a lot of this come up lately, and it's just it's just another one of the things going on in the world today.
Yep.
So
sure is. So
what's next for you? Like anything different?
Well, what's next for me? I just signed a contract last week to do a baseball book. The early books I wrote were basically sports, and some of them did very well. And I decided I didn't feel like doing sports anymore. To the horror of my agent at that time, he said, "The publishers are calling me. If you could do this and do that, you could." And, I was getting much less of an advance on books, the subject that was new to me. At that time, they considered me a sports writer, but I went ahead and I did books like this. I did criminal justice, and I did a true crime book. I did a book on free speech and the First Amendment. I did a memoir. And but this publisher that I'm working for now, Skyhorse, they've been looking at me to go back to sports for a while. So actually, what happened was I had another book in mind, and he said, "You want to do this book?" They wanted a book on the Yankees in the '30s, and you won't have to do a long proposal. We'll go to contract right away. And so it was very enticing at my age. I didn't feel like fooling around for months to see who wants this book or that book or who's going to pay more or offer a better deal. I was happy just to keep working. So I said okay, and I signed a contract last week, and I'm working on it now. So
fantastic. Now, so how do people get a hold of you if they have an idea or want to comment?
On the book, one way to do it, if they're in the industry, or they go through my agent or publisher. But, I mean, basically it says in here that I live in Tompkins Cove, New York. And those who really want to make the effort, look up. They call the operator and say, I want to get this guy Cohen in Tompkins Cove. There aren't many of us here. And, they write, they call, whatever. I answer all letters. Some people want an autograph, whatever. But, I don't like to play hard to get on stuff like this. If people have something to say and they want to get hold of me, all they got to do is look me up.
Well, there you go. I think people don't call anymore, but so they're all texting.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. If I want to get my grandchildren, even an email doesn't help.
No.
I mean, people go nuts with this kind of stuff. I don't text. I don't know how to text. My thumbs are not that agile, I think.
Yeah.
But it's that's the way people contact you now.
Yeah, it's different. But
yeah.
Well, it's been an interesting conversation, and thanks very much for taking this time and talking with me and for the audience. I appreciate it.
I appreciate. Yeah, I enjoyed it very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
I'll be back.